Добрый день, разрешите представиться. Меня зовут Жуковец Юрий Эдуардович, можно просто Юрий. Вот. Немножко там в программке были не совсем правильно указана тема, но основная тема находится в следующем. Мы мигрировали собственную систему с SQL сервера на Postgres, и данная презентация она основывается на том, как сказать, куда вам идти, чтобы решить ваши проблемы, когда вы занимаетесь непосредственно переписыванием ваших систем, вашего кода, для того, чтобы перенести SQL сервер на Postgres.
Why this happened? I want to represent my company. I work with the composition design, digital design. We work with the global projects for automatization of our main big clients, of our commercial clients like Sberbank. Why is it important to say a few words about them? Just for you to understand that our clients are very conservative on choosing their solutions when they move to Postgres. We said that maybe we will try some Linux. We say no, we want to try the window on Postgres, and only then we'll think about implementation it on Linux. So one of the renegades is writing on Windows languages like .NET. So, and they'll probably will continue working like that. We have some own development with our own platform. We have a big number of packaging applications and solutions for administration, for our government institutions that take the reports, the document control, all that you order at the government services, then the government institutions, they are taking this queries from you. On the right side, these are the service. We had few clients that moved to Postgres from the Ministry of Economic Development, try to move it as well, but they use SQL Server. And the biggest client that we have, that's the Russian Property, Federal Agency for State Property. These are online services clients. Just for you to understand that 1 million of users working with bank cards, for instance, if you see the transaction, sorry. So millions of cards, bank cards, this is 500 users in document control, because this is not pure multi-P, but 98% this is a lab system than a multi-P system. So let's say a few words about our solution. These are the variants. So what's the meaning? We need to support our system on different platforms. We cannot allow ourselves to write few variations of the code. This is why we have the code both for Linux and Windows. On SQL Server and Postgres, we had to take few levels of abstraction and access to data, the levels of business material, and different variants of data storage. There is thick client and thin client. So for us we use this meta description in order to regulate different objects and to look up for different data, to retrieve different data, not from the SQL language, but what is needed to be retrieved. So for us to move to Postgres, we had to come up with a system that we need to take the files out of the base, so it's not storage there and does not load Postgres. So we only keep the metadata inside the system. So for us to work on Linux, we moved from 8 core, and that supports different functionality for the data layer, which was written. There was no taking of the code, so we tested few utilities that allow us to take something to relegate something. So it was a big failure because this is a very hard process to bring up the data. So many generators, the companies that we address to about the proxy provider that you send to the SQL server will change it to to Postgres with no problem. As a result, after analysis of our traffic, they say sorry, we can do it, but the amount of money will be like 10 times bigger than we would change the systems ourselves. The specifics of the database is very precise. I'm the specialist in SQL Server, working for the last 20 years. I'm the specialist, plus I'm teaching. The Postgres I work with the last 4 years. I know how the SQL Server is working, how the Oracle is working. So we went to move to Postgres 4 years ago. When our government decided to have the import substitution, when I had the task, what are the differences of them and what do we need to do in order to make that transition. So when I came to the conference, I wanted to learn how the system is different. So I learned lots of presentations, and I was very interested. And I read a lot of interesting material before that, and I had the task to make this transition. So making this transition, you need to have the understanding of what are the difference and what we need to do. So there was a very good guide to move from one system to another. And what will be the problems on the way. So there was the report with 50 different slides where it was written what are the guarantees for us to rewrite our systems, making this transition, and what do we need to take into consideration and how to solve this problem. So we wrote this down. So in the last 2 years we had an extra experience, and I will tell a few words about that as well. So the database that we keep, it's an extension solution that belongs not only to us, but we can add something to that. It's like one enterprise, but it's more simplified, so people make the solutions and they upload it to the database, and it has to work. Doesn't matter if it's SQL or Postgres or something else. So with XML we made the meta description. When uploading we do the objects of the database and the database access, some procedures, and it's so practically done so well that you do not even have to think about it. On that level of the database, you just need to upload it. As for the business logic, it's on a low level. It's not brought up. So many generators that are uploading and from version to version. So there are a few codes that are updating the systems if we make something new or if we upload the new database. What are the peculiarities of the traffic itself? We have very non-standard data set with a different, not typical number. This is not a table. We use the server database as the object for caching the data at the level of the base. So this is one of the variants if we need to bring up the data and put it line by line. So the question is if it's at the server level or at the database level. We did lots of tests. So we put it to the database and bring it up line by line. So the different business logic levels going in order one by one, or going from server application to the server collection. So we have additional discrete data, LCU security, and based on the business objects. And some problem with Postgres, this is active usage of tables on SQL service. So 2 years ago we had the presentation which covered many moments and which explained the TCS. So some of the moments, the difference between two systems, please do not forget this is the video and you can have a look and do not take the pictures, you need to take the pictures, in some time you will get all the information. So to see that the functionality differs from one another, from a system level of one, system to another. So the system of the managing system of the database. So what is the main purpose for the client? The client says one thing, the traffic of the users we can survive with. This is the functionality of testing the performance. So when we test the performance, we ask the questions, what are we going to do from when we take make the transition of the system from one management system of the database to another. Let's keep one in the mode of reading, and then we will transmit all the data. And so we need to upload it to bring the data from one to another. So we take the data from SQL to Postgres. So the same with utilities, importing the transactions to Postgres. We have some thoughts about this is a serious question. So why do we need to bring in the data? We need to. So what will be the speed for the network traffic will allow us to translate this data to one system to another. So the question is, if it takes only half a second, there is only 1 million objects, and if you make the calculation, it will take you a month to upload this data from one system to another. So this is non-structured. What about the non-structured blocks? Then we take it to a separate data file and then bring it as a meta data. So what do we bring in the tables? The tables with the data itself and the functionality of the system. The problem of the custom types. If you take any utilities of the SQL or Progress or Oracle, when it sees different type that are not compatible to another. Talking about the customs, this is very specific and it has to do with the management system of the database. So immediately, since we use it, and I will explain you why later, separately, so Postgres fails. If we have problems, there is no other way but to transmit these data if we do it immediately or if we need to upload them. So do we need to keep two systems together at the same time, or do we need to bring one from another? Our clients want us to make the transition from one system to another. In the evening we make the transition, in the morning everything's ready. But we say, wait a minute, we still need to transfer some of the data, so it's a very political issue. So to say, we need to discuss that with the client. If the client is ready to give out the physical resources, if we have some extra space for additional information, if like for instance 2 terabytes of data, maybe this is not a lot, but for them it is a lot. So they have 2 more terabytes, so they have it to the final storage. So it depends on the network channels. The last client, where there was agency for the Russian property, they have less space on the disk. About the ways on how to make the transition of the data. I'm not talking about the physical transition. There are different utilities that you can use. Here are the links, you can use them. The most beautiful way how to do it is SIS on the level of a SQL server. It can do a lot, but not everything, unfortunately. And SIS has problems because it goes line by line and it relies on the speed. We've written our customs application, which will suck the information and will pour it in another location. So with Postgres, it allows you to do that, and we'll tell about this later. So we thought, let's upload it and take to the Postgres and then put it down. Maybe to change script stuff. So it was rolled back because of the time limit. So we thought that the custom clearance will generate the script from the backup of the Postgres. So this base has to be PG restored, and then we said, no, maybe it's not a good idea, it's too hard to do. Not all of the data have to be retrieved in the final database. So this is the question of the flat files. copy paste in Postgres, for instance. So this has to do with the replication of the SQL in progress, and we use it, like for instance, if we take one view and we add some additional data if it is necessary. So there is the question of preliminary transition of the data to the new system. So the fastest way on how to. So what are the problems? So what is the flat file? No question at all. We can do that easily. But the thing is that what are we going to upload? The format has to be compatible to Postgres. What does SQL do? We can write a custom application that will upload it, but it's very slow. In SQL Service we have utility, and in Postgres we have copy. And PG and copy. So these are some, you can find the solutions in internet, but it took us a long time until we found it. Then doing uploading, we need to follow up, and this is to unload it and uploading it, we need to follow it in order, the base by base. So in the structure, the problem is that the columns in Postgres, it's very case sensitive, and SQL in our world is insensitive measure. So we have big columns that are different from the small ones, and the names are different, so the final database exists in the frames of small and big letters. So the structures are specified by the generator, so we can change the names of the columns, and this is on the level of generator. What have we done? We didn't make the double code, I wrote everything in SQL, back file, and going table by table with a connection, with a BCP, the connection between this, and we make the select on uploading compatible to Postgres. For Postgres, the uploading is very clear. We check up the readiness of the tables, and then we pour in uploading it and when the connections are compatible. So both of the bases belong to us. The structure and the architecture has to be the same. They are identical based on the objects and the connection inside the base and the connection between the bases. That's a lot of text here on the slide. So just to show it on the video. So with that type of script, which generates everything, we have script from export from SQL Server and from the files to Postgres in the order that we sort of pick up the tables. So what are the problems that are being solved with the script? We have timestamp. No, it's a different. In SQL Server, it's a datetime. In SQL Server, time, but it's a totalizer of changing the lines. So if we put the first loading, that's one. Lots of problems with changing the code. That's the first presentation. So we do it the way the Postgres wants it to see. The way the data needs to be, so be true false. The date time is the 121 format. As the text of the uploading, it has to be in text all the different tabulator, the translation, and different types, and so on and so forth. And that has to be also taken in null, meaning the first symbol is 2/, the way the Postgres wants it. SQL variant, we did our own type that gives the description of the array description, the way Postgres wants it for the loading. All other type are loaded the way they've been primarily represented. So the problems, our nice selector is very long, it does not get into the back file of BCP, so we have to regenerate, and so the first select is done from the representatives. So lots of data needs to be classified into different columns, so everything is generated, and we started uploading it, but it doesn't upload because we want the coding from Windows. So we need to put in the utility for Postgres that we will work together with the windows. So we import in the table and we load column by column from the file that has been specified. So then again the problem, the encoding. Unfortunately, SQL Server on default is operating or is running with sync code 16 UTF. It doesn't like number 8. Postgres likes UTF-8. So it does not understand the symbols. It doesn't see if there are no empty lines. It puts empty symbols. Visually you don't see it, but binary when you see when the lines are empty, we decided maybe not the correct converter. You bring up the file and you convert it in a different one, but with PS script we deleted all the 0 digits, 0 symbols. When if all the file is taken, it takes a lot of I/O memory. So now we have the data and we need to test the system. So we need to check performance and the box. So what we need to do, first we need to set up Postgres. First of all, we put the SQL, it digs up all the sources and the maximum level, and Postgres needs to work with a coffee machine, coffee grain machine. So the same directions we need to do in SQL service. So but I rarely see that administrators who do such setups, even though there are less than Postgres, but still you need to pay lots of attention to the memory because it's working in a different way. It was in previous presentations, but this is what you do guaranteed at the moment of testing, when we show how a system is working. So we need to set up the memory, the processor, see the transactions. In the SQL Server there is a vacuum, and 5:30 we'll have a presentation on the colleagues, those who want to use this system and doesn't know what to do with it and where to look for some things. You need a physical access to be set up because the levels of access to the data on the SQL Server and Postgres are extremely different. We need to learn all the setups and set it all up. If we do not know what to do, there is such a thing as that link, the first one, you put your logic meaning of your system, and you follow this link, and they say your database is such and such, you have so many users, you have such load for the traffic, these are your average characteristics of what you need to do based on your current hardware. At least it will give you some base directions. 80% of the administrators, they use these recommendations following the link. Then your traffic is running and you need to make some deep setups, and then there's such nice utility like Moment Soup, which help you to analyze the traffic and will give you more precise recommendations on how to set up your system. When the system is running, you need to understand how it works. So we need to understand what you need to change and what you need to develop. So what kind of problems you may face and you need to solve. So these are all the directions. Why Mamatsu helps us to see the metrics that will be optimized later on. How do we check the SQL Server? There are really nice, cool utilities that will check up the traffic and to see what in SQL. And in Postgres we do not have such utility. So you monitor this traffic online, you can set up and make all the queries that are, and then set it to the register and we will analyze that.
Unfortunately, it's not enough because this utility allows to make a good log. PGBagger shows you all the problems which are in the log, but simply long queries will not help. you should check at the plan then. One of the problems which we saw, the same query at some point fails, and you can only check it in the plan how it works. The query worked, the procedure worked, and function and progress was okay, but at some point the function starts to work differently. Both statistics, nothing changed in statistic gathered, the table works, but it still starts to behave differently. Well, it's a fantasy, the system is still developing, we hope it will develop as soon as possible. Second thing, what queries were long-running queries? PGConf statements allows to fine-tune and gather all the statistics on long queries, and we can see the top of longest queries. It's also possible to provide monitoring how it works on Zabbix, monitoring that allows to see the statistics on the object usage, how they were read in your tables, who read them, how many reads, who used indices. It would allow to provide a solution what can have been done wrong. Index scan and scan index search and scan HIPAA, for instance. You can see it all and you can understand what was wrong. How we tested it. We have a Microsoft environment, Visual Studio, test controllers, test agents, which are installed on one or more machines, which monitor the load. How the system performance are being seen. Transaction per seconds. It's not an indicator for us. Why? Because for us an indicator is how much living traffic and database and the whole system can bear. Because abstract TPS is nothing. I saw a lot of things when people are based on abstract TPS, saying our server holds 200,000 million transactions a second. It doesn't mean anything because you shouldn't take transaction per second, but the living traffic of living system a second. What the system does during this traffic. For that, we have an emulator of user work, and we understand the traffic directly, what our users do, registration of a card, typical queries. There are a lot of typical queries, by the way. How many objects are registered on average? How are they used? We have codes, we have scripts for that, emulating all that. We start the test controller and we can evaluate the load. It's insert, sampling of some typical moments and non-typical moments with some probability rate. The load is given to the system, and then we check when it's going to drop. What does it mean drop? Every customer, every client asks us to operate for some period of time. It's not important whether it's fast or slow. He wants that every query to be executed within 2 seconds, say. If we fit in this time, we believe it's everything okay. If not, then it's not okay. For the end user, it's important that their employee work well inside the system. So we have a number of tests. If we see them dropping, it means that we do not fit in the specific time. But if we can hold the load and all tests are done on time, 98% at least, it means that we can hold the load and everything is good. What are we optimizing? Quite simple and straightforward things, but not always. Normally, long queries are being optimized. It's clear we take long queries in the log, we analyze their extension, their plans, but the system still starts bad because no one thinks about fast queries, which work not a second, but hundreds and thousands of seconds, or mainly 10,000s. Fractions, because the system generates very many of them and they have to be also optimized. First of all, because there are too many and they impact the whole operation of the whole system. We tested on Postgres 16 cores. Postgres showed us very good performance. We could provide 8.5 thousand users a system consecutively, concurrently. And in the previous version it was 2.5 thousand. New version gives us much more. We tested it all, and what were the problems we faced? Clear, lacking indices. We have plans of queries, and the situation is quite rare. We have indexes on SQL. We understand how we can use the work of this system. It's not just one table. We have around 500, 600 tables. And the most problem is that this is a scalable system from the user side. If user does something, new objects can appear, new descriptions can appear, and behavior starts to change. We should analyze the general cases of operation in the system. We have searches. Search is a definition, is a notion, and if we can decompose it, we can find business objects and then provide data. Inside object search, we use intersect. It works very long. A SQL Server can understand that if intersected, if is a set of data uniquely intersected, it can understand that if one set is too small, it shouldn't make the second set. So we decided to make the downgrade to the level of 2000, SQL Server 2000. Some time ago we had a good operation of intersect, and some 10 years ago we had a migration of generators from inner joins to intersects and accepts. And we had to downgrade it back. We had quite simple queries and huge tables which are joins but not quite clear in their selectivity. If they join by one column in 1%, they have lower selectivity, it means they are unique, and 90% big selectivity, so many values are being selected. If the join is going on, Postgres understands that everything is fine, but it turns out that from time to time the plans are failing and it starts to work long. If you take the same query and make manually, everything works perfectly. What to do in this situation is not quite clear. Most probably it's just a point of optimization. We will write to people to do this optimization. Debugging and fine-tuning generators, and we did it. What are other problems? Pure programmer type. We got used to have some operators and they work equally, but not always. They work with like a little bit different. Likes work differently. We realized the SQL variant, the abstract value, and we had to refine it. We had very strong requirements on allies and else's. When you write something, you should set a clear allies, how to address it. If you write an identical code in Postgres, at the point of return of values, CT values, the only one table, no points, no issues of addressing the table, and table is select. Require additional aliasing because I don't know what to select for. Maybe there is a bug of translator, I don't understand. But the most common problem is with using CTA in return expressions. Temporary tables. It's quite a hard moment related to Postgres, very needs to be worked out. People promised us to handle this issue for 2 years already. First we create and then we either delete them after session or during the session. We analyze the full set of the code, and everywhere where temporary tables are used, we just give a unique table name related to this business functionality, specific business functionality. Then we do not delete it. If we just truncate it and use it further on. We exclude as much as possible the recreation of tables and the changing of catalogs. And what we do additionally, statistics of data inside. Everywhere where we change table data and we understand where it happens, we additionally insert analyze table. It would take patch for one C post professional where just the data change is going on. They do preliminary analyze. We don't want to do it because it's done everywhere, but we want to do it only in the places where we think are suitable for that. Some abstract considerations in terms of simple things which are interesting for Postgres. Collections transmission is a huge problem all the time. I have to quarrel with my developers. They like to transmit it through dots and commas. In SQL, we can turn it to XML and decompose line by line through a semicolon, but it takes a lot of time. Anyway, you should place it first in XML, then you should source it as from the table. In Postgres, it can be done much easier. We can do it in a formula array and select it. It was quite expensive. You make a return. For my developer understanding, return means after this word we have to leave the function. But the code is continuing, is running. The return happens just when you return table function. But it can be played around quick in a beautiful way if the procedure is made by union all, and depending on the parameters, you can take different union, different containers of the table. You shouldn't process it on the level of different returns of data. You can make several returns. They will go up as a separate set of parameters. For instance, if you have one parameter, you make a select from VR1 table, from the different table a different set with a different condition. So we process objects using different parameters in a different way. And so instead of several if parameters, in different parameters, we just select that one parameter is return, the second one is also return, and if there's nothing there, it will be just empty, and we will have a ready-made set from the outside. Very often we should know what data were changed in the SQL server. Output int statement is responsible for that, and update statement, and we will always know what lines were changed. Returning statement can tell us which lines were changed by the operator. But we do not know about old lines. We should check it in the log or invent something else. And just a few slides about automation. We had a certain headache. SQL service is a separate service, but it's still an integral part of SQL Server agent, which allows all objects to be automated. Before version 10, I don't remember exactly, we had only PG agent. Its problem was that it is related only to the database. There should be only one instance. So centralized automation agent was there, but how to address it, to make a job, but we always go from the outside of the base to the creation of a special job. In order to create it, we need to address the external database. It's a it's a problem. It can be written, but from the simple addressing, it means a different address space, different database. It's not the context of the work scope of the code. We should create a DB link as an open source in a SQL server, or, if possible, to create game tables which are attached to DB link, and you work with tables. But there are other problems related to counts, increment counts. Our professional colleagues created a scheduler which was issued recently. There is an instance. Jobs are not centralized. They exist inside the database, and each job can do anything in the related database. It's easier. It supports initialization of cron by schedule. If we speak about the centralized server, you can know how to address central tables. You put it in the central base and work it. You can fine-tune service to work with your database, but the problem is that we have a requirement for the centralized automation service which should work with all databases, and the ideology of Postgres that one installation means one base. It should be considered as one base. It's only thin placed. It's the log transactions, which is common for all bases inside Postgres. SQL variant, one slide. It's a very, very big headache for us. Maybe it should have been done differently, but JSON appeared. There could be realization on JSON level. It could be rewritten for JSON, but it should be done 2.5 years ago. It's possible to index here to get the type of comparison. If comparison is wrong, the whole query will be dumped. In Postgres, there is no direct replacement. There is always an option to solve. Data can be stored, and then next to it the identifier. And this, the business layer should be determined which should be used. You can invent own extension, write it on your language, but it's not interesting because it's hard to support. Our next position, we do not make no own compilation of Postgres. We have only standard Postgres. We do not touch it because it will result in problems. You have only one client, it's good, but in our case, we have around 50 clients and more than thousands of platforms across the whole Russia. We should work, which gives us standard compilations of vanilla Postgres or Postgres Professional. We do not touch and do not change anything there. So it's possible to do, but it's very hard to support. Postgres allows to create so-called structural own types. SQL variant, what we do, we made a type which supports typization or ranking. It's something like C class, but more correct would be not to have a class, but union on the C level. First you have a type and then you write it all to one address space. In Postgres, this type is at the level of a class. It exists on the storage level. There are few fields containing type of data. It should be a union, of course. So we have the field with the type and the value to store it. To support it, Postgres has an opportunity to describe comparison rules and recording rules. From the client code point of view, you should support map composite to transfer it. You should introduce the client code in order to search and compare. There are functional indices, but you can calculate the columns which can be materialized and used in the work. What we faced in the previous type was a good notion. We take text value of SQL variant. If we compare it, it's okay, but how can we reflect any text variant? We just have to invent a visual interpretation. If we take just a visual interpretation, it will be in brackets and after semicolon as a massive. If it's interesting for you how to upload automated scripts from the database and create this SQL variant, I can give you this script for you. Your questions, please. Thank you for your presentation. If you say that temporary table shouldn't be deleted, just truncated, but when we do parallel transactions, when we use the same name, what will happen? You work in different sessions, in different connections. It's your own table. If you switch, it means a new connection, a new unique new table inside this connection. And if I pull this connection, it's not possible. If you come again with this business code, you reuse it. What is the point of temporary table in terms of connection? It should be automatically created when you write with the code. You populate it with data. Then if you quit, it's deleted. You close the connection. One small remark: if you use a PG provider, it means automatic pooling from ADO.NET point of view, and connections are not closed. I just say it's clean. When you again come to this with the same function functionality, if you see the same structure, it has the same structure for this business functionality. And if you check it, you can just get clean and reused. It means unique structure, and you always use the same data which are related to your current open connection. Then my next question, for instance, I am not able to revoke generated procedure. I have to generate the code and don't know. It's the wrongly created business layer then. We have dynamic queries and stored procedures. When we make a dynamic query with meta description, it means dynamics. If the dynamics are used once, we use counters, and we understand that this is reusable, and even in dynamics we use these tables. They are generated not at the level of the storage, but at the level of the code. What is the difference from SQL storage? if a temporary table in a SQL service is created inside the code, when you leave, it will for sure be deleted. In Postgres, it's like a static table. It is so it can be done guaranteed in a guaranteed way. And we had a problem here from about PG variables, how to transform it to the second cluster. Clusterization is not supported because temporary tables are outside of the base and outside of the internal catalog. In Postgres, we create a temporary table, a static table, which is followed up by the communication. But if you quit, it stays, and it stays. You just quit this connection. You can even check it in the system catalog and really work with this table. Then my second question was about the stored procedure. I need to generate the SQL code sequence, but the problem is when I go to the share, the only latest operation comes. If I select then drop, I do not have the return of the select, just I get the successful truncate. You should write the proper code which would return you the correct query. You should put it to the storage, and secondly, you return it. What provider do you use in C#? NPG. It understands a few data sets if they returned. You can write the code in a correct way. I can tell you offline. I can show you. First, you either make a wrong structure. For instance, you return the data set. What should you do inside the database if you return something? I have to truncate something, clean something. What? What exactly? Why can't you do it before you return this data set? You can store it before, because I don't have a separate record set in Postgres. No, there are. If you look at my presentation, I provided solutions. It's wonderful return of several data sets, which can return you several data sets. But you have wrap it up in a stored procedure, and you can get the return of data sets, which then can be pulled, and it's going to be a hard mechanism as far as I understand, because you should wrap it in a transaction form, and then you should address it without closing transaction. It holds resources of Postgres. It's not so easy, but still it's as a variant of dynamic fields. Well, you make a return query, you describe what you return, and there you shouldn't describe it. You can do it dynamically. We also use this mechanism. Denis Mamedov told us about it. Well, the return of multiple unidentified data set. From one storage we need 2, 3, or 5. We don't know how many sets. Based on the business logic, we can only know how much we return, but the DBMS doesn't know it, which code is generated. You can return different sets from different columns, and only business layer knows what to return.
My question is the following. I have the connection. One C and then SQL. How to get to the 1C enterprise and Postgres? Have you made the transition of the data from the DT that are not used from SQL from MSQL? I haven't done that. If you noticed, I said T SQL, MS SQL, MS SQL. MySQL is a completely different thing. I know, I've heard about it, but no, sorry, I said the wrong terminology, MS SQL. If you took my script, that will take 99% of your question. I will come up to you if you don't mind. Yes, $10. Yes, my company will pay. Okay, then no problem. So my question is the following. The picture about optimization on the slide, you said that you were looking for some requirements. Tell me So shortly about the testing, something about testing, optimization. We set up the queries. Maybe you could tell a few words of what tools you use for making that clear to find the errors and things like that. It says right here, you go, you take this parameter, you write it in the register, line 4, what we want to follow up. You want all of them, or you want a minimum time. Or this is the module of auto explain, what's been working for a long time. It also gives you the plan of how it's been performed, and then you need to understand how plan is working. Then it gives you the statistics and the SQL Server, that's the top. And you do not know how to write the request, and admin you write top hard request, and this gives you the PG start. And then the use of where, how often you've been checking. Sometimes you have the hit, and this is the last spot that you check, and you see that this index has not been used. So this is the set of tools that helps you with your current product. Yes, approximately everyone uses these tools. There are some beautiful applications, but this is the first thing you do if you want to test something that is not working and is not running well. It will show you 98% of all the problems that you have in your system. And then you just need to read the documentation. I'm sorry, it will take me more than a week to tell you all about it. How did you switch the Microsoft on the mobility group? Always on what? Always on the mobility group. The group of accessibility. We just threw it away. No. Why we threw it away? Because we have some value issue. If our clients are ready to make the payment for us to finish, we have like about 8,000 users on our network. We have the centralized central bank. This is online 50,000 users that are working in the systems, and we take the real users. I don't think any average user would support that. We have internal understanding on how to do that. We understand how to make the replica, which is heavy, but we can change the timetables. But for now, nobody is willing to help us with that. Nobody's willing to pay for that. So you have your clients, a bank with no hair. It's working on Microsoft, and it's not making the transition to Progress. They have different tasks, and they don't. I know exactly how to do it, but for now they do not want to help us financially, because this transition is very hard. When we work for the public institutes, and they're extremely conservative. So when we say that we need to make the transition, or otherwise we'll cut you off, they say no, we don't want to. Well, there are some little steps. There are some ministries that are trying to make this transition, and there are some ministries that are going from not Lotus, but from Lotus, not SQL. They make these transitions. There are some clients that like to go with SQL, but when we tell them that they can use the old system because of the database management system, they say, "Oh, okay, then we will not do this transition." But in MPT, if they want to stay there, if they say that if it's not necessary for us to make the transition, then we will not make this transition. Because some of the systems we have to test, and we take MR. The traffic is for the last 10 years, an enormous number of different objects for us to test. They're ready to take it, they're ready to make the transition. We show all this to them, and they say no. And when it's operating now, they don't want to. We just add additional data from other systems for them. I can explain you how to do it, but in this case, unfortunately you need to rewrite the code because of the timetables, PG variables. I haven't mentioned that, but we have made the analysis on how to substitute this temporary tables. About the arrays and the temporary tables, you can keep this time, which you can use later on. When using it, you need to keep up that temporarily, and then you need to do something with it. With the speed of all other mechanisms, it works slower. It needs to have a good statistics for the query. So an only temporal table can do that, but unfortunately it has the load on the system catalog. For Nissan, you need to rewrite move from PG variables, and then there are some cache to save the data. It cannot replicate to Nissan, and all of our temporary objects, they are located and temporary and connected to Wilson, and where the traffic goes, we know exactly where business layer addresses, what server does it go to in order to read the 5-6 services from SQL. And we started with SQL Server. The temporary data was this replica, and it goes exactly back there because it knows where this data is located. It's a TempDB, or the data visual data is located specifically for it. It doesn't make sense in Postgres because the replication, it will go to standby, but unfortunately PG variables will not be created because it will not verify the data, because we don't want to use the data on the main node. In SQL, it's on the main node and only makes a replica to the secondary one. In our case, it's written in both replicas, so we will not reach what we need. You had the layer. Do I need to roll back? There was a layer yellow and blue. Working with Postgres, yellow and blue. There was a little boy in the end. No. It was in the beginning. In the very beginning, the architecture of your application. So, how much of the separate code and general code, and what's your evaluation of how much you will spend? If you look at the previous presentation, I wish I could show you, but 50 or 70 slides. It took me 1 hour, so I cannot tell one and the same thing. Please watch the video. And when we understood that we need to make a transition to Postgres, we just felt very bad because we understood that this is a gigantic platform and we need to rewrite it, and it will be very hard. But then we thought a little bit more, and we thought, maybe this is not so bad. So all of SQL code, it took me 9 months to rewrite the whole code from SQL. I understand the specification. For a usual developer, it will take 1 year and a half, but it took me only 9 months. For the netcode, there was some incompatibility of 10-20% of functions incompatibility. So you work only through one level, correct? Yes. Yes, in business area, we have the identical code here. It compilates for Linux and Windows, both. So our requirements can be Windows Server or Linux Server Business, or SQL Server from Linux Server, or Linux Postgres from Windows Server. So all this is completely abstract. What is the management system of database and the node? When we changed the data core, it was about 20. So it took us 5-6 months to do additional writing of the code. If you check the SQL code, it's about .NET. It's about there is more business logics and the number of objects. So we had to make it abstract, and we see the level, and we can read the level for the new database. So there is no problem to switch to different management system of the database. So basically use that code, or it's our own thing. All the generators are written by us. It's hosted home made, so to say. not go through the procedures, but the procedures need to do what they have to do, and they should not be very complicated. They need to retrieve the data, and this is it. Or retrieve the data and search for the data, nothing else. All the rest is on the business layer, all the operations with data is on that level. I think this is it. Do we have any more questions? It took me more than I expected.
Ну, спасибо, что меня выслушали.
Thank you for listening.
И поможет вам в вашей же работе.
Спасибо. Напоминаю, голосуйте за доклады, записывайтесь на блиц доклады.